a quiet drift into the soft, strange era when America's most trusted cure-all came in a tiny beige pill that everyone swore they weren't addicted to. You start the night drifting into a world where the lights are dimmer, the sofas are softer, and the air carries the faint, powdery scent of old carpet and even older optimism. It's the 1970s, though you don't quite know that yet, and you ease into it the way someone slides into a warm bath. Slowly, cautiously, and with a quiet suspicion that you might not make it through this day. Not because of danger, but because everything feels so heavy, so muffled, so pleasantly beige. A gentle hum fills the background. Maybe it's the fridge. Maybe it's your own brain. Hard to say, really. Before we go any deeper, go ahead and like and subscribe if your fingers aren't already melting into your blanket. And tell me softly, in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Your answer helps me imagine exactly where you're falling asleep. Now, just settle in, breathe out, and let your shoulders sink a little deeper. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You open your eyes in a warm living room with wood-paneled walls. The kind of walls that say, "We tried our best, but color coordination was never our strength." A crocheted Afghan rests across the back of the couch. Somewhere, a TV glows faintly, like a fireplace powered by questionable wiring. You sit in the middle of it all, in secondhand jeans that you don't remember putting on. Everything feels soft, muted, and oddly reassuring. You hear a neighbor's car door shut outside. One of those long, steel-framed cars that could survive minor meteor impacts and still drive to work. A woman across the room, maybe a friend, maybe someone you've never seen before, sips from a ceramic mug with a sunflower painted on the side. She nods at you with the universal expression of the 70s. A weary half-smile that says, "We're all doing our best, sweetie." You notice a small orange bottle sitting on the coffee table between you. Prescription label. A familiar pharmaceutical logo. And right below it, in clean, firm type, diazepam. Valium, the most prescribed drug in America in 1974. This is your first historical fact of the night, carrying the soft authority of a bedtime story whispered under blankets. Someone, maybe the woman, maybe the room itself, leans slightly toward you and murmurs, "It keeps the nerves calm, dear." The tone is reassuring, almost maternal. You aren't even sure if they're talking to you. You breathe in the warm, velvet air, and you feel the room gently lulling you into its rhythm. A record plays softly, muffled drums, a bass line that wanders like it's trying to find its way home. You can't quite name the song. Historians still debate whether the average American household even knew what record was spinning at any given time, or if everyone just let the music happen to them, like weather. You shift slightly on the couch and feel the textured fabric against your fingertips. This is the era when upholstery had the courage to be scratchy. Brave times, truly. You look around the room again. Hanging plants droop from macrame slings overhead, each one looking like it's reconsidering its life choices. A thick shag rug sprawls across the floor. It is at least 70% polyester and 30% crushed dreams. There is a quiet thump from the kitchen. Someone is rummaging through cabinets. You hear the clink of glass, and then a voice. "Do you want something to help you relax?" You turn your head slowly, dreamily. Everything feels like you're underwater, even though you haven't taken anything yet. And that's when you see it. A small bowl filled with pastel-colored pills. A decorative bowl. Like candy. This, for the record, is our weird cultural tidbit. Some households in the 70s kept tranquilizers in candy dishes. A choice. A decision. A lifestyle. You blink slowly, letting the details wash over you. The quiet hum. The soft glow. the strangely edible-looking pills. You aren't scared. You're not even confused. You're drifting, floating, observing, like a ghost but a polite one. You notice, distantly, that the walls seem to breathe a little. Not literally, no worries, but figuratively, the way everything does when you're tired and the world is a little too soft around the edges. Someone hands you a cup of chamomile tea. You're not sure who. It appears in your hands like a gentle suggestion from the universe. The steam curls upward, slow and ghost-like, and you inhale the warmth. Your eyelids droop, not from medicine, but from the weight of the decade. A cat hops onto the couch beside you, kneading at a knitted blanket. Its fur glows gold under the lamplight, and it purrs at a frequency that could probably dissolve anxiety on contact. The room sighs again. You lean back. The story continues. And as your breathing syncs with the soft, sleepy hum of this 1970s living room, you can't help but wonder how a single pill became the quiet companion of millions. Far more popular than bell-bottoms, lava lamps, and whatever that macrame plant holder is trying to accomplish. You watch the steam rise. Your heartbeat slows. You settle deeper into the couch. Somewhere, a door closes gently. The night drifts on, and so do you. You stay on the couch a little longer, letting the room cradle you. The hum grows softer, the air warmer, and your awareness drifts like dust motes in sunlight. The crocheted blanket slips further over your lap, as though gravity itself has decided to participate in your relaxation. The woman with the sunflower mug settles into the armchair beside you. Her posture is perfect in a distinctly 1970s way. Slightly slouched, a little resigned, but trying very hard to look like she's got everything under control. She looks at you with the gentle eyes of someone who has explained the same thing to many people. That everything is fine, and if it isn't, well, that's why Valium exists. You reach forward and nudge the orange bottle with your fingertips. It rolls slightly, tapping against a magazine. On the cover, the tranquilizer decade? Bold, confident, unapologetically beige. The headline sits above an article promising to explain why everyone from housewives to businessmen to somebody's uncle, named Gary, suddenly needed help, taking the edge off. And while it looks dramatic in print, you can tell nobody here is panicking. They're too tired for panic. A gentle breeze slips in through a slightly open window. It smells faintly of cut grass and someone barbecuing 2 houses down. This is the era when neighbors talked, and lawnmowers roared, and people borrowed sugar without the faintest shame. You lean back, letting the warmth settle into your bones. The woman speaks quietly, almost like a bedtime story. Doctors say it's safe. Everyone takes it. Even my dentist. You don't know if she means during work, on lunch breaks, or as a recreational hobby. She doesn't clarify. You don't ask. In the corner, a large, wooden console TV murmurs with soft static before flickering into an afternoon talk show. The host smiles with an enthusiasm that feels illegal at this hour. You watch the screen with half-lidded eyes. People are discussing stress, modern anxieties, the rising tension of a fast-paced America. You wonder how fast-paced things could possibly be, considering everyone is sitting perfectly still and contemplating tranquilizers like they're discussing new wallpaper patterns. A man enters the room, a neighbor, maybe, or a friend, wearing a polyester shirt that shines like it's made of melted grocery bags. He plops into a recliner and sighs dramatically, the universal sign for long day at work. Without asking, the woman hands him the bowl of pills. He takes 1, maybe 2, and leans back with a contented grunt. This is your moment for the second section's major historical fact. By 1978, Americans were taking over 2.3 billion doses of Valium per year. A quiet empire built on calmness. You sit with that number for a moment. Feels too large, too vague, too dreamy. Like the kind of statistic someone invents after 2 glasses of boxed wine. Yet it was true. Or at least everyone said it was. Historians still debate whether the pharmaceutical companies underestimated or overestimated the demand, though the general consensus is, oh yes, people were taking a lot of these. You sip your tea. The room sways gently, as if rocking itself to sleep. The cat curls beside you and rests its head on your thigh. You feel the soft vibration of its purr, drifting through your body like a lullaby. You notice the wallpaper now, a floral pattern that looks like it escaped from a grandmother's dream journal. The flowers repeat in hypnotic rows. If you stare at them too long, they start to wiggle slightly. Not literally, but enough that you decide to blink your eyes slowly, letting the visual settle. A clock ticks softly from the wall. Each tick feels slower than the last. Time, it seems, is quietly dissolving. Someone in the kitchen opens a bottle of wine. Another sigh. Another quiet conversation about nerves and stress and just needing something to help unwind. You stand up, wandering slowly through the living room. The shag carpet swallows your footsteps, warm and forgiving. You walk into the hallway, the same hallway you passed earlier without noticing. Now you notice. The wallpaper here is different. Striped, orange and brown. The colors of a sunset that gave up halfway through. You walk past a small table cluttered with keys, wallets, and a brochure titled, Understanding Mild Anxiety. There is a doodle on the cover. A smiling cloud. Optimistic. Friendly. Perhaps overly confident for something trying to explain human stress. You continue down the hall. At the end of it, a bedroom glows with soft lamplight. You step inside slowly, letting your senses take in each detail. A quilted bedspread. Neatly arranged pillows. A radio sitting on the nightstand, playing soft AM chatter. You sit on the edge of the bed and exhale. Your body feels heavier now. Sleepier. Not from medication. Just from the gentle weight of a decade where everything moved like honey. You lie back. The ceiling looks slightly textured, like someone splattered oatmeal up there and called it a design choice. Congratulations. You're fully in 1970s interior design mode now. Your eyes flutter. You remember the living room, the bottle, the pills, the calm, the soft rise and fall of everyone's tired voices. And as your breathing evens out, you sense that you're not just lying in a bedroom. You're lying in the very heart of a culture that quietly soothed itself with tiny beige tablets and reassurances whispered over afternoon tea. The room dims. The hum returns. Your limbs melt into the bedspread. And the night stretches out before you warm, slow, and tranquil. You lie there for a while, letting the quiet hum settle around your mind like a warm quilt. The ceiling's textured patterns seem to shift, not in a dramatic or alarming way, but in the soft, sleepy manner of something that's just as tired as you are. Maybe the plaster is resting too. Maybe everything is. After a slow moment or a long one. Time blends here. You push yourself up from the bed, feeling the plush fabric beneath your palms. The house seems to breathe with you. Every inhale pulls the soft scent of laundry detergent, candles, and a faint whisper of, is that lavender? Or maybe it's someone's perfume lingering from earlier. Hard to say. The decade is scented in a way that can't quite be bottled, though a few companies will certainly try. You wander back into the hallway, your feet sinking into the carpet. It swallows each footstep like a secret. The lighting is warm, dim, and intentionally low wattage. the sort of lighting that makes everyone look softer, calmer, slightly blurry, and far more forgiving of each other's questionable fashion choices. You drift past the living room again. The same people sit in the same spots, though their postures have managed to droop just a little more, like wilting plants at golden hour. The man in the shiny shirt has now kicked off his shoes. The woman with the sunflower mug is swirling her tea as though she's trying to divine the future from it. She glances toward you and gives a slow nod. "Rough day?" she asks, even though she doesn't wait for the answer. It's a rhetorical question. In this era, every day is a rough day. Every day is also somehow fine. The orange prescription bottle has migrated closer to the center of the table, as if it wants equal attention. A magazine now lies open next to it. This one displays a headline reading, "Tranquility. Is it a trend or a necessity?" Fair question. One that no magazine ever really answers properly. Someone turns the TV up a little. A psychologist is being interviewed, sitting stiffly in a brown suit. He smiles with the thin, tight-lipped expression of a man who has been explaining the difference between stress and anxiety for far too many years. He says something about the pressures of modern life, and you glance around the room, trying to determine what exactly feels so modern about it. Maybe it's the avocado green kitchen appliances. Maybe it's the carpet that seems to be made of repurposed Muppet fur. He continues, "Americans are working harder, sleeping less, and juggling more." You nod instinctively, even though your to-do list consists of "exist gently." There's a clink from the kitchen, someone setting down a glass. Then a sigh, the universal sound of adulthood. You wander toward the kitchen doorway, leaning lightly on the frame. Warm light spills across the counters, reflecting off the chrome toaster and a bowl of fruit that looks suspiciously decorative and possibly plastic. A woman, different from the one in the living room, stands stirring something at the stove. She wears one of those patterned aprons that proudly declares, "If you can't stand the heat, pour yourself a drink." She glances at you. "Want dinner?" You don't actually know what meal it is. Time of day has no meaning anymore. But you nod anyway. She places a plate in front of you, offering a warm smile that feels like a hug wrapped in polyester. A casserole sits quietly on the dish, steaming softly and smelling like comfort and survival. You take a bite. The texture is warm, soothing, and vaguely creamy. Food in the 70s has a certain commitment to casseroles, as if the nation collectively decided that if you mix everything together and heat it, the emotional problems will also blend and disappear. Someone from the living room calls out, "That casserole has been in our family for years." A strange thing to brag about, but endearing nonetheless. You continue eating, slowly and dreamily. The air feels thicker now, as if the warmth from the oven has softened the entire house. As you take another bite, your mind drifts toward the era's obsession with calmness, with smoothing the edges of days that feel too sharp, with quieting minds that spin too quickly. And so arrives this section's major historical fact. Valium became the first drug in U.S. history to surpass $1 billion in sales for a single year. It was a cultural staple, quietly humming in the background of millions of households, just like the refrigerator behind you. The cook sets down her spoon and sighs. "Everyone's anxious these days," she mutters softly. Not dramatically, just factually, like she's announcing the weather. Somewhere behind you, a drawer opens. Someone coughs. Someone laughs. Someone clinks a pill bottle lightly against the wood table. This is your obscure tidbit for the section. In the early 70s, some pharmacies gave out Valium samples in tiny velvet pouches, little drawstring bags that looked suspiciously like medieval coin purses. You imagine someone saying, Here's your calmness, dear, while handing over a pouch like a wizard offering magical dust. You lean on the counter, watching the casserole steam rise in slow, dreamy spirals. The world feels soft again. Historians still debate whether the popularity of tranquilizers reflected a cultural crisis or a cultural convenience, or maybe both. But in this moment, standing in a warm kitchen with a plate of comfort food, you feel like the house itself is nodding in agreement with whatever explanation feels easiest. You inhale, exhale. Everything smooths out. Everything melts a little. The refrigerator hum deepens. The lights dim. The carpet muffles footsteps. And the night drifts on like syrup. You walk out of the kitchen, drifting like a feather on warm air. The hallway seems even softer now, the wallpaper patterns gentler, like they've decided to stop trying so hard and just exist peacefully. You run your fingers along the wooden trim. It's cool, smooth, worn down by years of hands doing the exact same thing. The living room glows with golden lamplight. The group looks settled, properly melted into furniture, relaxed in the way only a decade obsessed with calm can be. The bowl of pastel pills sits like a centerpiece of the modern American table. Not quite decorative, not quite essential, but always present. Someone pats the couch, inviting you to sit. You sink into the cushions, which sigh beneath your weight like they've been waiting to cradle your existential fatigue all day. A new program flickers on the TV. An advertisement featuring a woman in a perfectly pressed dress standing in her spotless kitchen. Her smile is wide, almost impossibly so. Soft music plays. A voice narrates soothingly, "Valium, for the days that feel a little too much." Everyone in the room nods as if the commercial is addressing them individually. The woman on the screen sits at her table, takes a small pill with a glass of water, and looks out the window with serene confidence, as though divinely reassured that everything, the laundry, the errands, the chaos, will be fine. You shift, letting your shoulder rest against the couch's back. A blanket is draped across your lap again. It might be the same one you had earlier, or a different one. The house operates on a system of unspoken comfort logistics that you're not entirely privy to. Someone begins telling a story, a long, winding, meandering story that might not have a point. It starts with, "Back in my day," and then detours sharply into a recollection about a neighbor's dog. You listen patiently, letting the words wash over you. The story is calming, not because of what's being said, but because of how sleepily it unfolds, like a river that forgot where it was supposed to go. As you listen, you become aware of this section's major historical fact. During the 1970s, Valium was marketed directly to doctors as a treatment for everything from anxiety to everyday stress of modern living, which, if you squint, covers the entire human experience. You nod, understanding in a dreamlike way. Outside the window, dusk deepens. The streetlights glow softly, each one haloed by a gentle haze. A car rolls down the street, slow and deliberate, its headlights casting warm beams across the living room wall. You sink deeper into your seat. The hum of conversation fades into a mellow murmur. Someone passes a bowl of popcorn, each kernel a tiny cloud of salt and nostalgia. The popcorn slips through your fingers as you take a handful. Warm, buttery, soothing. And here comes your obscure cultural tidbit. In the 70s, some families kept prescription pill bottles in decorative wooden boxes carved like miniature treasure chests. Because even anxiety medication deserves a sense of whimsy. You can almost picture it. A tiny pirate chest filled not with gold, but with calmness. The room chuckles softly at something you barely caught. A lamp flickers gently, casting shadows that dance like slow-moving silhouettes. The cat returns, hopping onto the armrest beside you. His fur brushes your arm. His purr vibrates through the couch. You breathe deeply. Warm air in, warm air out. Everything dissolves, softens, melts. Historians still debate whether tranquilizers shaped the culture or whether the culture shaped the tranquilizers. But in this room, with its quiet laughter, its soft glow, its comfortable exhaustion, it feels like the debate doesn't matter. You lean your head back. Your eyelids grow heavy. The voices fade like waves. And once again, the night pulls you deeper into its warm, sleepy fold. You step gently from the late 1960s into the early glow of a new decade, the way you might step from a warm bath onto a cool floor, slowly, hesitating just a little, but knowing the transition is coming whether you're ready or not. The air feels slightly different here, softer, a bit grainier, like an old photograph left too long in a drawer. And somewhere behind your thoughts, the low hum of American life is deepening, expanding, stretching its arms as the 1970s quietly unfold. You walk down a city street now, still soft, still dreamlike, but busier than the neighborhoods you visited earlier. Cars rattle by with square edges and earth-tone paint jobs. People walk with a kind of dazed determination, as if they're heading somewhere important but forgot what it was. You can practically hear the polyester swishing. A warm morning breeze pushes past you with the smell of newspapers, fresh bagels, gasoline, and just a hint of confusion about where society is heading. It's the perfect scent for a country that's about to embrace Valium more passionately than teenagers embrace new slang words. As you move forward, you feel the cultural shift settling around you. The frantic optimism of the 1960s has mellowed into something quieter, heavier, more contemplative. And with that emotional weight comes a growing desire for relief, for steadiness, calm, and a sense that reality can be softened just enough to feel manageable. Which is precisely where Valium steps in, wearing a metaphorical superhero cape that, frankly, looks like it was ironed too much by someone trying desperately to keep their life in order. You pass a pharmacy window displaying neatly stacked pill bottles. Inside, the pharmacist arranges them with the same care someone uses when arranging cookies on a plate for guests they're not quite ready to entertain. The bottles glint gently, and you can almost feel the anticipation radiating from the shelves. There's demand in the air, a big one. A historical fact floats lightly toward you, landing softly like a snowflake. In 1972, Valium became the single most prescribed medication in the United States. You let that settle. The entire medical landscape is shifting beneath your feet, but it happens so quietly you barely notice. You continue walking and find yourself entering a small grocery store. Not bustling, not chaotic, but filled with the low, comforting murmur of everyday life. A woman in a beige coat checks her shopping list. A man in wide-collar shirt browses fruit with the seriousness of someone choosing a new political ideology. A child whines gently about cereal. It's all beautifully, sleepily mundane. And yet, behind these soft moments lies a strange cultural truth. Some magazines in the early 70s began running articles about living better through chemistry, subtly reinforcing the idea that emotional smoothness was both achievable and desirable. You raise a sleepy eyebrow, well, metaphorically. Physically, your eyebrows are far too relaxed to attempt anything dramatic. As you stroll past the canned goods aisle, you overhear a couple discussing stress. Work stress, inflation stress, existential stress that seems to hover around their shoulders like invisible parrots. It's clear that everyone feels a little overwhelmed. And in a world where everyone wants a softer landing, Valium becomes the quiet, reliable companion tucked into medicine cabinets across the country. You turn a corner and step through a door that shouldn't exist in a grocery store. Yet here it is, leading into a living room where someone's television plays the evening news. Economic uncertainty, political turmoil, changing social expectations. They all swirl in gentle loops on the screen, their sharp edges somehow softened for your sleepy narration. You sit on the couch again. Apparently couches are your safe zone in this story, and feel the decade wrap around you like a knit blanket that's been washed too many times but still feels right. The scholarly uncertainty whispers again at your ear. Historians still debate whether Valium surged because society grew more anxious or because pharmaceutical marketing convinced people they were. A question that sits between eras like a cat that refuses to choose which room it wants to sleep in. A light joke drifts through your mind. If stress were a national resource in the 70s, America could have powered the entire planet. Soft laughter, almost a sigh, escapes you. Outside, the sunlight fades into a mellow amber. It's not dark yet. It's just gentling itself. Your steps slow. Your breath deepens. The story pulls you softly toward the next part, where the 1970s settle even more deeply into their patterns of calm-seeking comfort. You step into the next scene with the unrushed grace of someone entering a library, not because you intend to read anything, but because the silence feels like a gift. The atmosphere holds a kind of dreamy stillness, like the world is running on half speed, matching the gentle tone of your nighttime storytelling. You're in a doctor's office again, but this one feels different from the earlier mid-century space. The lighting is warmer, the decor more modern, though modern in the 1970s means lots of browns, oranges, and patterns that appear to be arguing with themselves. Still, there's comfort here. A soft hum from a fish tank. A stack of magazines with titles like Better Living and Modern Woman. A coat rack that looks tired of holding coats. A patient sits across from the doctor, a woman in her 30s, looking both polished and worn at the same time. You can tell she's doing everything she can to balance work, family, expectations, hopes, and the growing realization that the world she lives in moves a little faster than her emotions can comfortably handle. She speaks with a soft voice. A long week, a tense job environment, a feeling of being on edge. The doctor nods, slow and calm, and reaches for the prescription pad with the kind of familiarity usually reserved for reaching for a light switch. You watch him write diazepam, with neat handwriting that somehow conveys both professionalism and exhaustion. He tears off the slip. She takes it with gratitude. And there it is, the tiny transaction shaping the emotional landscape of the entire decade. You step outside the office and walk into a waiting room filled with people who look like they're carrying invisible suitcases full of stress. You sense the undercurrent. This isn't about weakness or carelessness. It's about a society learning the hard way that emotional strain doesn't dissolve just because you put on a clean shirt and offer a polite smile. Outside the clinic, the day feels heavier, warmer, tinted with the golden haze unique to 1970s film stock. Someone passes you holding a newspaper with headlines about inflation and recession fears. You can almost hear the soft sighs of millions of Americans looking for something, anything, that brings calm. A historical fact appears gently before you. By 1974, Valium prescriptions exceeded 100 million annually in the United States. A number so large and so quiet, it feels like a whisper echoing across every household. You walk through a residential building now, drifting up a staircase where carpeting muffles each step. On the third floor, a door opens slightly, not suspiciously, just enough for you to see a man sitting at a table, staring at a stack of bills and rubbing his temples. His glasses rest crooked on his nose, and a bottle of Valium sits nearby, its presence neither dramatic nor hidden, just part of his attempt to remain steady. A strange and obscure cultural tidbit waltzes into your mind. Some people in the 70s referred to Valium casually as the tiny vacation, a nickname that sounds both humorous and slightly too accurate. You smile at the softness of it. The scholarly uncertainty joins again. Historians still debate whether the high prescription rates reflected true dependence or simply the era's medical philosophy that calmness was a sign of good health. You imagine a panel of academics shrugging gently in unison. You keep walking, drifting into a living room with shag carpeting that looks like it could hide several small household items permanently. A record player spins something mellow, maybe a bit of Carole King, maybe some soft jazz. The air vibrates with the low, comfortable hum of a decade trying its best to cope with modernity. A soft, ironic line bubbles up. If coping mechanisms were collectible items in the 70s, Valium would have been the rare holographic edition. You slow your steps. You let the ambient calm seep into your mind. Outside, the late afternoon light fades into a dreamy dusk, and the entire decade sighs around you, settling deeper into its patterns of comfort-seeking and emotional smoothing. With that, Section 6 gently folds itself closed. You step back into the story with the same quiet ease you'd used to slip into a warm sweater. Slowly, comfortably, with a sense that the fabric has already memorized the shape of your shoulders. The world around you takes on a honeyed glow, that trademark 1970s softness, where even shadows seem too polite to appear sharply. You're walking down a suburban street now, the kind lined with neat lawns, tidy hedges, and mailboxes that all appear to be related. It's early evening, that magical moment when sunlight turns amber and gently folds itself against the houses like an affectionate cat. A warm breeze drifts across your face, carrying the smells of grilled chicken, fresh-cut grass, and the faint whiff of someone's citrusy perfume lingering from a neighborhood stroll. Everything feels pleasant, comforting, almost suspiciously serene, like a sitcom neighborhood where every emotional challenge is solvable in 22 minutes or fewer. You hear the soft ring of a landline phone from inside a house to your right, an old-fashioned, bell-like chime that echoes lightly. You drift through the slightly ajar front door in your dreamlike narrator form. Inside, a woman paces near the phone cord, twisting it nervously around her finger. On the coffee table sits a freshly opened prescription bottle of Valium, the label facing outward as if it were expecting company. She isn't hysterical. She isn't weak. She's just tired. Tired in the way the whole decade seems to be. Carrying expectations, holding her breath through uncertainties, pretending everything is fine because that's what polite society requests. Her doctor told her, "This will help you take the edge off." A phrase so common in the era that it practically became a slogan. A historical fact glows gently in your mind. By the mid-1970s, Valium use among American women was nearly double that among men, largely due to how stress and household expectations were framed. You step carefully through the living room. The decor is a shrine to muted colors and ambitious textures. There's a macrame owl on the wall that seems to be judging you for no reason. A potted plant slumps wearily in the corner. A stack of magazines on the coffee table promises ways to keep your home stress-free. A phrase that likely produced stress just by being printed. The woman sits, exhales deeply, and finally stops twisting the phone cord. Outside, you wander again into the warm suburban dusk. A dog barks faintly. A neighbor waters their garden while thinking about grocery prices. A teenager rides a bicycle too fast, because teenagers are universal and timeless in their questionable decisions. You stroll by a window and notice a man sitting at his dining table with his head in his hands. A small glass of water stands beside a pill bottle. He lifts his head, takes a deep breath, and reaches for stability. Emotional steadiness delivered in a tiny, chalky tablet. A strange cultural tidbit floats to you like a curious balloon. Some magazines in the late 70s began referring to Valium as Mother's Little Helper, though the nickname originally belonged to an earlier tranquilizer. The overlap is a little messy, a little imprecise, much like the decade itself. And as always, the scholarly uncertainty enters politely. Historians still debate whether doctors overprescribed these medications or whether it was simply the best tool they believed they had at the time. You wander farther into the neighborhood. The hum of televisions blends with the chirping of crickets in a strangely soothing harmony. Voices drift through open windows, soft conversations, gentle arguments, the sound of forks tapping ceramic plates, the sigh of a nation learning to live alongside its anxieties. A light joke surfaces. If everyone in 1977 had written a memoir, at least half of them would have included a sentence starting with, "Well, my doctor suggested Valium." You smile sleepily. You slow your steps, and the gentle momentum of Section 7 carries you forward, like a leaf drifting along a quiet stream. You move into the next scene with the graceful drifting motion of someone floating through a dream. Not rushing, not walking, just gently being carried by the soft current of the story. The lighting around you cools into evening hues, deepening blues and violet shadows stretching out across the world like a quilt being pulled over everything. You're in a kitchen now, a very 1970s kitchen. The countertops have patterns so bold they could start political debates. There's a mustard yellow telephone on the wall. A cookbook sits open to a recipe titled something like festive meatloaf, which looks earnest and slightly confused. A woman leans against the counter, staring at a small pill bottle sitting near the sugar canister. She isn't crying. She isn't overwhelmed in a dramatic way. She's simply processing the day, one of those long days where nothing catastrophic happened, but somehow everything still felt heavier than it should. She pours a glass of water. She taps her fingers on the counter as if trying to shake off emotions like crumbs. She inhales deeply, the way someone does before deciding to keep going because stopping isn't an option. You see her shoulders soften, just a little. You step into the adjoining living room, where her husband sits at the television, watching the news with a grim expression. Reports of political uncertainty, global conflict, economic strain. It's the kind of news cycle that makes people collectively murmur, "Maybe tomorrow will feel better." Behind the news anchor's voice, you hear a vacuum cleaner running upstairs, a child practicing an instrument badly, the clatter of dishes. Life in motion. Life in all directions. Life happening faster than anyone planned. A historical fact drifts toward you, warm and calm. During the peak of Valium's popularity, some studies estimated that nearly 1 in 5 American adults had used the drug at least once. You float through the room and into another hallway. The wallpaper here features floral patterns that seem slightly too cheerful for their surroundings. You peek into a bedroom where someone sits quietly near a window, reflecting on life in that distant, contemplative way the 1970s seemed to encourage. A soft cultural tidbit appears. Some prescription pads in the 70s were customized with tiny illustrations or cartoons, and doctors occasionally joked that patients collected them like souvenirs. You imagine someone showing off a drawer full of them like trading cards. You wander downstairs again, crossing the same kitchen where the woman still stands, now slowly flipping through a magazine called Modern Home Harmony. Articles promise calm, balance, happiness, serenity. All the emotional states that seem right on the edge of slipping away. The scholarly uncertainty hums again. Historians still debate whether Valium's popularity grew more from patient demand or from the era's medical training, which often positioned tranquilizers as frontline emotional tools. You nod softly. The past is full of these little puzzles, questions that don't need answers to feel meaningful. You leave the house and drift down the street. Porch lights flick on automatically, one by one, like stars learning their cue. Someone's barbecue grill emits a final wisp of smoke. A child is called indoors with a gentle, tired voice. A radio plays distant soft rock, the kind meant for unwinding after a long day. A sleepy joke floats up. If relaxation had a national spokesperson in 1978, it would have been Valium wearing a leisure suit. You laugh quietly to yourself, or at least your mind does. The neighborhood grows quieter, softer, more dreamlike. Your steps slow, your breath deepens, and the story carries you gently towards Section 9, like being guided from one comfortable room into another. You slip quietly into the next part of this drifting narrative, the way someone might ease themselves into a warm bath. Slowly, gently, with that sigh of relief that comes from feeling the world loosen its grip on your shoulders. The light around you softens into a mellow evening glow, the kind that turns every object into a silhouette framed in honeyed gold. You find yourself inside a small pharmacy. The bell over the door jingles faintly as your presence brushes through. Rows of shelves stretch before you, boxes and bottles neatly organized like obedient little soldiers standing at attention. Every surface has that faint scent of cardboard, disinfectant, and peppermint that only old pharmacies seem to have mastered. Behind the counter, a pharmacist in a crisp white coat reviews a stack of prescription slips. His glasses are perched halfway down his nose, not because they need to be, but because it gives him an air of authority. A small sign on the counter reads, "Ask your pharmacist about better living through modern chemistry." The irony floats like a paper boat across calm water. On the counter sits a large bottle of Valium tablets, samples meant for physicians. You watch as the pharmacist fills several small orange bottles, each accompanied by a label typed on an old, noisy prescription machine. A major historical fact nudges gently into place. By 1978, Valium had become the first drug in U.S. history to surpass 2 billion tablets sold in a single year. You drift down the aisle, past cough syrups, vitamins, and a rack of greeting cards offering every emotion imaginable, except the one most Americans were quietly dealing with: chronic stress. A young man enters, shoulders tense, expression drawn. He murmurs something to the pharmacist, who nods with a sympathetic smile. The man leaves moments later, clutching a small brown paper bag with the careful, reverent grip of someone carrying a fragile secret. You wander past the cosmetics aisle, where a woman tests a coral lipstick on her wrist, while pretending not to glance at the display marked for anxiety and tension. She gives a quick look around. No one is watching, then selects a small box of tranquilizers with the same guilty discretion someone might use to buy an embarrassing magazine. A cultural tidbit drifts in like a feather. In the 1970s, some pharmacies offered punch card loyalty programs specifically for sedatives, as if collecting points for anxiety relief was perfectly normal. You step back into the gentle shimmer of evening air. The sun has dipped lower now, shadows stretching across the parking lot like soft stripes. A bus hums by, carrying passengers wearing expressions that were practically trademarks of the decade. Determined, exhausted, hopeful, resigned, all at once. You pass a payphone where someone is arguing quietly about a prescription refill. You can't hear the words, but the posture tells the whole story. Shoulders hunched, hand pressed to forehead, voice lowered in that half-apology, half-begged tone. The scholarly uncertainty returns with its measured calm. Historians still debate whether the pharmaceutical boom reflected rising stress levels or simply a cultural shift toward medicalizing everyday discomfort. You keep walking, Your footsteps echo softly against the pavement. A sleepy joke rises in your mind. If the 1970s had a national motto, it might have been just take something and lie down. You smile gently. The story wraps its arms around you again, ushering you into the deeper quiet of the evening, preparing you to slip seamlessly into the next chapter. You drift forward as though carried by a warm breeze, slow, effortless, dreamlike. The world around you shifts into a muted nighttime palette. Indigo skies, gentle amber windows, and the distant hum of lives winding down after a long day. Now you find yourself inside a small living room, lit mostly by a single lamp with a pleated shade that casts soft rings of light onto the carpet. A record player turns slowly, playing something calm, perhaps a mellow jazz track or the soft croon of a singer who always sounds slightly sleepy. A man sits in an armchair wearing house slippers and a robe patterned with geometric shapes that only the 1970s had the confidence to produce. His posture is relaxed, though the tension in his brow betrays the fatigue beneath the surface. On the side table beside him, a glass of water, a pair of reading glasses, and a bottle of Valium. He picks up the newspaper. You can almost hear the gentle rustle of the pages as he unfolds a section titled, "Nation Faces New Uncertainties." The headlines weigh heavy, but not surprising. The decade was like that, restless, humming with unease. He exhales, sets the paper down, and reaches for the bottle. He reads the label like someone studying a familiar poem. The gesture is neither desperate nor careless. It's habitual, quietly hopeful, a small, private ritual. You step back and glide toward the kitchen, where a kettle sits on the stove, steam rising gently. A woman walks in, wraps a cardigan around herself, and pours tea into 2 mugs. You notice her movements are slow, mindful in the way people behave when they've been carrying invisible weight all day. She hands a mug to the man in the living room. They exchange a tired smile, a small moment of shared understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. A major historical fact drifts into place with soft edges. In some surveys from the late 70s, over 60% of Valium prescriptions were for mild, nonspecific complaints, what doctors then called everyday nervousness. You drift closer. The woman sits on the couch, folding her legs beneath her. The house feels lived in, warm, imperfect. There are magazines on the coffee table, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle, a plant hanging in a macrame holder, and an ashtray filled with the exhausted remains of the day. An obscure tidbit arrives gently. Some households stored tranquilizers in decorative tins instead of medicine cabinets, as though anxiety relief deserved a more dignified container. You float toward the window, where moonlight spills across the rug like spilled milk. Outside, the neighborhood is serene. Cars parked neatly, porch lights glowing, the soft sound of a distant dog barking at nothing in particular. You sense the scholarly uncertainty arrive with its familiar calm. Historians still debate whether the drug's widespread use was a unique moment in time or simply the visible tip of a long-standing cultural reliance on chemical comfort. You wander down the hallway, passing family photos in wooden frames, children smiling, parents pretending not to be tired, a family navigating life the way millions of others did, muddling through the stress, the hope, the monotony, the noise, the uncertainties. A quiet joke surfaces. By 1979, Valium was practically the unofficial sponsor of household patients. The thought makes you smile softly, your mind relaxing further. The house quiets. The story softens. Your steps slow to almost nothing. You drift onward, as though being carried by a gentle current of warm nighttime air. The scene shifts once more, dissolving the living room into a soft haze. replacing it with the quiet interior of a doctor's office. Everything is wrapped in that comforting dimness of late evening. Shadows softened, edges rounded, the world quiet enough to feel like it's exhaling. Inside the office, a desk lamp glows like a little moon, its light falling on stacks of patient charts and a sphygmomanometer resting like a coiled serpent beside a stethoscope. The faint smell of paper, antiseptic, and old wood lingers, as familiar as a memory someone forgot they remembered. A physician sits at the desk, elbows resting on the blotter, glasses lifted to rub tired eyes. His coat is unbuttoned, his tie slightly loosened. On the desk is a prescription pad, one of those old, thick ones with carbon sheets that leave faint blue ghosts of past signatures. He taps a pencil, thinking. A patient sits across from him, a middle-aged woman with a handbag folded neatly on her lap. Her perfume is subtle, and her expression is worn but polite. She explains, in a voice barely above a whisper, that she's been feeling overwhelmed. She hasn't been sleeping well. There's too much to do and never enough time. She's not sick, exactly, just tired. Always tired. The doctor listens, kindly, sympathetically, though a little hurried. He flips through her chart. Everything is normal, and that was often how these visits went. A major historical fact drifts in gently. By the mid-1970s, some medical schools taught that mild stress and tension could be effectively managed with benzodiazepines, making prescriptions a routine part of care. The doctor signs the prescription with a practiced flourish. His pen glides smoothly, as though it has traveled this exact path thousands of times, and perhaps it has. He tears the sheet from the pad, hands it over. They exchange tired smiles. Two people doing their best in a world that often felt a size too big. You float toward a nearby shelf lined with medical books. Stress and the Modern Mind, New Approaches to Tension Relief, the physician's desk reference in its brick-thick form. Between them sits an ashtray with a cigarette still faintly smoking, an unspoken reminder that coping strategies took many shapes. A soft comedic note slides in. In the 70s, half of medicine ran on caffeine, and the other half ran on Valium. You smile at its warmth. The doctor turns off the lamp, leaving only the streetlights filtering through the blinds in thin silver stripes. The office dissolves into darkness as you drift onward, deeper and calmer, ready to enter the next chapter. Everything grows even quieter now, as though the world has tucked itself in. You find yourself floating over a suburban neighborhood at night. Street lamps cast yellow pools of light onto silent roads. Houses sit calmly, their windows glowing with the soft warmth of late evening routines winding down. The sky is a rich, velvety blue, one shade away from sleep. You glide closer, settling in above a single home, a modest two-story house with a manicured lawn and a welcome mat faded from years of footsteps. Inside, the family is settling down for the night. In the kitchen, a father rinses dishes slowly, water running in a steady whisper. On the counter, among the salt and pepper shakers and a stack of unopened mail, sits a small bottle of Valium. Not hidden, not flaunted, just there, as ordinary as a jar of vitamins. A mother sits at the table with a planner open, pencil tapping gently as she reviews the endless list of tomorrow's tasks. School pickups, work meetings, errands, dinner. She sighs, deeply but quietly, the way people do when there's no real solution, only small comforts. Upstairs, a teenager listens to music through big padded headphones. A poster of a rock band stares down from the wall. Hair big, expressions intense. The teen's room glows in rhythmic pulses from a color-changing lamp. A historical whisper enters softly. By the late 1970s, Tranquilizers had become one of the most common medications kept in American households, right beside cough syrup and aspirin. You float toward the living room, where a television glows like a small artificial fireplace. A talk show host jokes about stress, and the audience laughs a little too knowingly. Commercials appear between segments offering everything from headache tablets to instant coffee to soothing relief for the modern lifestyle. A gentle fringe detail arrives. Some magazines of the era included full-page Valium ads featuring serene watercolor landscapes, mountains, lakes, clouds, suggesting tranquility that many felt drifting farther and farther from reach. You drift upstairs, where the house quiets. A child sleeps peacefully under a blanket patterned with stars and planets. A night light glows amber in the corner. The parent steps into the hallway, turns off the light, and stands still for a moment. One hand on the wall, head lowered, breathing slowly. A moment to gather themselves. Then they walk toward the bedroom, and your attention shifts to the night outside the window. The moon hangs low, round, and reassuring. Crickets chirp softly. A sprinkler turns somewhere in the distance, rhythm steady, hypnotic. A gentle note of scholarly uncertainty arrives, settling comfortably into the quiet. Was Valium simply a reflection of a stressful era, or a symbol of the growing tendency to treat life's pressure points with medication? Historians still weigh both possibilities. You drift upward, away from the house, into the softness of the night sky. The world grows quieter. Your thoughts slow to a gentle hum. The story prepares itself to slip into deeper night. You drift gently, as though riding a slow current of warm night air. The suburban landscape below softens again, turning into a watercolor blur. Houses, cars, lawns all melting into calming shapes. As the scenery shifts, you find yourself gliding into the interior of a 1970s office building. It's quiet, oddly peaceful, the sort of after-hours silence where you can hear a paperclip if it falls on carpet. You float past rows of cubicles, those beige, fabric-covered walls that somehow manage to look tired even though they don't have a face. Desk lamps glow dimly, creating little pockets of yellowish warmth against the otherwise shadowy room. In one cubicle sits a typewriter, still warm from the day's use, its ink ribbon faintly scented like metal and chemicals. Nearby rests a half-drunk mug of coffee, long gone cold. And there, in the top drawer left slightly open, sits a small orange bottle. Valium, nestled among paper clips and a pack of gum. You drift through the space like a gentle breeze, noticing how ordinary it all feels. How completely woven into the everyday fabric this little pill had become. A major historical fact drifts in. By 1978, Valium prescriptions were so common that many American workplaces quietly assumed employees kept them, just in case for tension or nerves. A coat draped over a chair suggests the person who sat here left in a hurry, probably thinking about tomorrow's deadlines. A family photo taped to the cubicle wall shows a smiling group posed at a beach. Bright clothes, sunburned shoulders, frozen in a happier moment than the one attached to this desk. You float onward to a conference room. In the center sits a long wood table, polished but showing faint scratches. Stories of countless meetings, presentations, and debates. A projector hums faintly, its reel left in place after some afternoon training session. On the table, a styrofoam cup, a legal pad with hurried notes, and an unopened stress ball from a corporate employee well-being initiative. The irony sits politely and silently in the corner, but it's there. You move further, and the office melts into a break room where a vending machine glows with fluorescent tubes. Inside, potato chips, chocolate bars, and tiny plastic-wrapped pastries that look like sugary punctuation marks. A corkboard hangs nearby with memos pinned to it, reminders about meetings, deadlines, and upcoming team-building activities to increase productivity, which always sounded suspiciously like doing your regular job but outside. A small comedic breeze passes through. You suspect more stress was generated by team building than cured by it. The air hums with the faint rattle of the HVAC system. A coffee maker gurgles its last drops into an empty pot, the bittersweet soundtrack of the late 70s workforce. You float gently out of the office into a corridor where fluorescent lights flicker softly, as though trying their hardest despite being perpetually sleepy. The floor's linoleum tiles reflect your movement like calm water. Then, as if following a thread woven through time, the office slowly dissolves into darkness, preparing you for what comes next. The darkness lightens again, revealing the glow of neon signs bleeding gently into a nighttime city street. Cars pass with muted hums, their headlights stretching like long ribbons of white. You drift downward toward the entrance of a late-night diner. A bell jingles softly as you slip inside. The diner is warm, almost cozy, with vinyl booths faded from years of elbows leaning and coffee cups sliding. Overhead, pendant lights cast a buttery glow that makes everything feel slightly slowed down. A waitress in a pastel uniform carries a pot of coffee as though it weighs nothing. Yet you feel the years she's been doing this in the slight slump of her shoulders. A man sits alone at the counter, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. He stares into a cup of coffee like it contains answers. At his elbow sits a little amber bottle, its label facing inward, almost shy. His fingers tap gently next to it, the rhythm steady and soft. The bottle is so quietly present you might miss it if you weren't looking. A historic detail arrives softly, careful not to disturb the quiet. Throughout the 1970s, late-night diners became informal sanctuaries for workers seeking a brief pause from the relentless pace of urban life. And another cultural tidbit floats in like steam off the coffee. Some diners kept stress relief boxes behind the counter, filled with puzzles, mints, or notes left by strangers. Tiny gestures from one weary night owl to another. You notice a student in a corner booth studying under the warm light, highlighter in hand. Their textbooks are open, but their eyes are drifting. A backpack slumps beside them like a tired companion. A soft breeze of irony drifts by. This student will remember the feeling of exhaustion more vividly than any chapter they're reading. The radio behind the counter plays a soft ballad, gentle guitar, distant drums, the kind of song that feels like a warm exhale. The waitress hums along while wiping down the counter. A couple shares a late meal in a booth by the window, forks moving slowly, conversation soft and unhurried. You drift toward the neon sign outside. Its red glow flickers like a heartbeat in the quiet night. A sentence of scholarly uncertainty settles in. Historians still debate whether the 1970s trend of late-night gathering spots reflected genuine community connection or simply exhausted people clinging to any available moment of comfort. You glide upward through the flickering light, back into the soft blue of the night sky. The city hums below, a mix of engines, conversations, and quiet sighs held by tired people. Far above, clouds drift like worn blankets across the stars. You breathe in the calm. The story breathes out around you, and the night grows even gentler. You drift downward again, as though lowering yourself into a warm bath made of memory and soft 1970s air. When the haze clears, you find yourself inside a modest living room. One of those spaces with thick carpeting that seems to swallow sound before it reaches your ears. The lamp in the corner casts a warm gold glow over everything. Shadows stretch gently across textured wallpaper. Something floral, subdued, perhaps chosen from a catalog promising modern serenity. There's a slight hum from a window air conditioner, a tired rhythm that feels like the room is breathing. You float above a coffee table cluttered with magazines. Family Circle, Good Housekeeping, Psychology Today, and a TV guide with the edges curled from use. A bowl of mixed nuts sits beside them, half-eaten. A crocheted coaster rests under a sweating glass of iced tea. And beside the tea, another orange bottle. Valium sits quietly, like a guest at a party who doesn't speak unless spoken to. A major historical fact enters softly. By the mid-70s, Valium had become the most commonly prescribed medication for American women, often for symptoms described as nerves, tension, or feeling overwhelmed. You float near the sofa where a woman sits curled into one corner, her posture tired in a way that doesn't come from physical labor alone. She stares at the television, its glow flickering across her face. An old sitcom rerun plays, the laugh track faint and distant, like echoes from a party she wasn't invited to. The woman brings a pillow closer, tucking it under her arm. Nearby, knitting needles rest in a basket beside half-finished yarn. You can almost feel her exhaustion, how the expectations of the time pressed gently but constantly, the kind of weight people rarely spoke aloud. A strange but true tidbit floats in like a quiet confession. Some households kept their Valium in decorative tins, right next to sewing supplies or aspirin, treating it almost like a domestic accessory. You drift toward the window. Outside, the neighborhood is calm. Porch lights glow in soft halos. A dog barks in the distance, then sighs itself back to sleep. Sprinklers click on somewhere down the street, their water whispering across the lawn. A breeze of humor drifts by. You notice that television was considered both entertainment and babysitter, and possibly also therapist, depending on the episode. You glide closer to the TV. The volume is low, but you catch the laughter again. Edited, predictable, oddly comforting. The kind of laughter designed not to startle anyone. She reaches absent-mindedly for the bottle on the coffee table, hesitates for a moment, and then places her hand back in her lap. You sense a mix of fatigue and routine, like someone following a path worn smooth by repetition. The air in the living room grows warmer and softer. Slowly, quietly, the room fades, and you drift forward. When the haze gently clears again, you're in the middle of a pharmacy. Late evening, almost closing time. The fluorescent lights overhead hum with their usual gentle insistence, casting a pale glow over neatly arranged aisles. You drift above the checkout counter where a cash register sits half open, containing bills and coins organized in tidy rows. Nearby is a display of candy bars and breath mints, those last-minute temptations that somehow feel both comforting and unnecessary. Behind the counter stands the pharmacist. White coat, tired eyes. A small radio plays soft jazz near the sink. On the counter between you is a stack of prescription slips. The ink is slightly smudged where hands have touched them throughout the day. You drift closer and read one. A familiar name, familiar dosage, Valium again. The pharmacist fills a bottle carefully, counting out the tablets with practiced precision. The pills drop into the tray with a soft tapping sound, one after another, like rain on a quiet roof. A major historical fact drifts in with a soft rustle. During the height of Valium's popularity, some pharmacies reported filling dozens of prescriptions a day, many written with minimal consultation. You glide past shelves filled with remedies for every imaginable discomfort. Cold medicine, cough syrup, aspirin, tonics promising energy, sleep, calm, clarity, all stacked like potential answers in colorful boxes. In a corner of the store sits a blood pressure station, the kind with a plastic seat and a cuff that squeezes your arm with the persistence of a distant relative. A teenage boy tests it out while chewing gum, clearly more interested in the machine's whirring motor than the numbers flashing on the tiny screen. A gentle, humorous breeze enters. You realize he's probably checking if the machine will explode, not whether he has hypertension. You float toward the back where greeting cards are displayed. Sympathy, congratulations, birthdays, anniversaries. The cards sway slightly, stirred by the movement of the air conditioning. A curious, obscure detail drifts in. Some pharmacies in the 1970s offered relaxation stations, small seating areas with calming music and pamphlets about stress, ironically located a few steps away from where Valium was dispensed. The pharmacist sighs, removes his glasses, rubs the bridge of his nose, then continues filling the prescription. Tap, tap, tap. The pills slide into the bottle. The cap twists on with a soft click. Scholarly uncertainty drifts by like a passing shadow. Historians still debate whether the pharmacies of the 1970s were overburdened, overly trusting, or simply operating with the medical norms of their time. You float higher, rising above the aisles. The hum of fluorescent lights blends with the jazz playing softly in the background. The pharmacist wipes the counter clean. The store grows quieter, shadows lengthening. And soon, gently, the pharmacy dissolves into a warm, velvety darkness that holds you like a blanket. You drift gently into a quiet bedroom, dim, still, wrapped in the comforting hush of late evening. The curtains are drawn, but a thin line of streetlight slips through and paints a faint silver stripe across the carpet. A bedside clock emits a soft, determined ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Each second feels like it's walking on tiptoe, afraid to disturb the peaceful dark. A dresser stands against the far wall, covered with neatly arranged bottles of perfume, a few hair rollers, and a framed photograph of a family at the beach. The edges of the photo curl slightly, touched by time but still holding the warmth of that day's sun. On the bed lies a paperback novel face down, its spine gently folded as though caught mid-sigh. The cover features a melodramatic illustration, mysterious silhouettes on a windswept cliff, their capes fluttering dramatically, as 70s book covers tend to insist. Then you see the nightstand, a modest wooden table, warm with age, holding a lamp, a coaster, a half-finished glass of water, and another familiar orange bottle. Valium sits beside the water like a conch shell washed up on a quiet beach, small yet sharply noticeable in the hush of the room. A historical fact drifts in. By 1974, nearly 1 in 3 American adults had been prescribed a tranquilizer at least once, with Valium leading the charge. You watch as a woman, perhaps the same one from earlier, perhaps not, enters the room. She moves slowly, shoulders weighted by the day's invisible burdens. She sits on the edge of the bed, sighing the kind of sigh that comes only once the door is closed and the world can't ask anything else of you. She picks up the book, reads a paragraph, sets it down again. Then she adjusts her pillow twice, then once more for good measure, pillow adjustment being, of course, a ritual older than fire. A soft comedic drift appears. You notice she spends more time fixing the pillow than actually lying on it. Truly, a universal experience. Her gaze falls toward the nightstand. Her fingers hover for a moment over the glass of water, then over the bottle beside it. There is no rush, no urgency. Just the quiet routine of a long, tiring era. She opens the drawer. Inside, hand lotion, peppermint candies, and a stack of tiny notepads from local supermarkets, each with an equally underwhelming slogan like "Shop Smart," "Shop Local," or fresh savings you can taste. An obscure cultural tidbit arrives like a gentle whisper. Some households kept small diaries specifically for tracking nervous spells, often encouraged by doctors who believed patterns could reveal hidden emotional triggers. The lamp's soft glow warms the blankets. The house is silent. The woman sits very still, listening to the steady ticking of the clock before finally easing herself into the bed. You drift upward, watching as the room settles into perfect calm, each shadow softening, each sound folding itself into the quiet. Your vision grows hazy once more. You drift onward. When the haze lifts again, you find yourself in an entirely different place. One where bustling voices fill the air. A medical conference. The carpet is patterned with geometric shapes that look like they were chosen after an enthusiastic argument between three interior designers. The chairs are arranged in careful rows, and doctors, mostly men in dark suits, stand around holding paper cups of lukewarm coffee. You drift above the crowd, listening as they exchange polite chatter. Words like stress response, tranquilization, and dosage standardization float up like bubbles rising through water. On a small stage stands a wooden podium. Behind it hangs a banner printed in bold serif letters. American Psychiatric Symposium, 1976. A presenter flips on an overhead projector, one of those charming beasts that hum softly and heat the air while casting a slightly crooked image on the screen. A major fact settles into the room with a soft thud. By the mid-70s, tranquilizers made up nearly 10% of all prescriptions written in the United States, with Valium dominating the category. Doctors scribble notes in small notepads, though half of them are clearly writing reminders unrelated to medicine. Pick up dry cleaning, call cousin back, buy more cereal. A gentle, humorous breeze enters. You realize medical conferences haven't changed much. 10% science, 90% trying to look awake while holding a coffee. The presenter adjusts his tie and speaks about the modern anxiety epidemic. His voice steady but tired. He discusses family stress, shifting workplaces, rising expectations, all with the tone of someone who's been over this material far too many times. Then he mentions the magic word Valium. A few doctors nod knowingly. A few scribble faster. One man in the back yawns with such intensity that his jaw seems to file a formal complaint. You drift toward a small table covered with pamphlets. How to identify emotional fatigue. The new role of tranquilizers. Household stress and the American family. And, mysteriously, one booklet about indoor plants. An obscure tidbit drifts in. Some 1970s conferences handed out tiny stress balls shaped like brains, long before stress balls were a mainstream item. You sense the room growing warm from the overhead lights. Projector fan hums. Someone coughs delicately. A cough so polite it could belong in a museum. Then comes the sentence wrapped in scholarly uncertainty. Historians still debate whether the medical establishment truly understood the long-term implications of widespread tranquilizer prescribing during this era. A polite round of applause rises from the audience, gentle as rain on a rooftop. The presenter steps away. The lights dim. You glide higher above the murmuring crowd until the scene softens around you, and the world fades back into quiet. You drift back into a quieter place now. An airy living room with avocado green carpet and sunlight filtering through sheer curtains patterned with geometric swirls. This is the kind of room where time moves slowly, like it's being careful not to bump into anything fragile. A boxy television hums in the corner, its wooden frame polished just enough to shine but not enough to call attention to itself. On the coffee table, a bowl of potpourri sits proudly, doing absolutely nothing to improve the aroma of the room, despite its lifelong mission. A newspaper lies open on the sofa. Headlines about inflation, gas shortages, and televised hearings peek up at you. And tucked between the pages, almost shyly, you spot a small advertisement. Ask your doctor about new solutions for stress. The font is gentle, the tone soothing, and the image shows a woman lying in a meadow definitely nowhere near her real life. A historical fact drifts in. By 1978, Valium had become the single most prescribed medication in the world. You watch as a couple enters the room, middle-aged, moving with the slow choreography of people who've had long weeks for many years in a row. The woman adjusts her glasses, the man rubs his temples, and for a brief moment they simply breathe. A subtle comedic sigh floats through the air. You notice they're doing that thing where both pretend they're not tired at all, yet simultaneously yawn like sleepy lions. They sit on the sofa. The TV plays a soft jingle, the kind that could hypnotize even the most caffeinated viewer. A commercial starts, bright, cheerful, suspiciously upbeat. It shows glossy kitchens, cheerful families, and impossibly serene housewives wearing aprons that have never once seen an actual spill. Valium isn't named out loud, of course. Not yet. But the message is unmistakable. Life is stressful. Help exists. You pass through the room, barely disturbing the dust motes drifting lazily in sunbeams. You glide upstairs, through hallways lined with family portraits and crocheted wall hangings. An obscure tidbit floats to the surface. Some households kept tension diaries, little notebooks tracking daily moods, inspired partly by magazine advice columns. You drift onward, light, weightless, dreamlike. The world softens again. You reappear in a pharmacy, bright, quiet, and lined with shelves that smell faintly of paper, mint, and whatever mysterious chemical makes all pharmacies smell the same. Behind the counter stands a pharmacist with thick glasses, flipping through a stack of prescriptions clipped neatly together. He pauses occasionally to adjust the mechanical cash register, which clicks and dings with the confidence of a machine that knows it will never be replaced. A woman steps up to the counter. She smiles politely. He smiles politely back. Both attempt the classic "we are fine, thank you" expression found universally in pharmacies, grocery stores, and DMV waiting lines. She hands over a small slip of paper. He glances at it, nods knowingly. A major fact settles in like a gentle snowfall. By the late 70s, some pharmacies filled hundreds of tranquilizer prescriptions per week, Valium among them. The pharmacist reaches for a bottle, amber-colored like crystallized honey. The label is simple. The instructions are familiar. The tone is soothing even before the pill ever reaches its destination. You hover near the ceiling as the rhythmic sounds of counting tablets echo faintly. A soft tap, tap, tap of pills landing in a tray, careful and measured. Your mind drifts to something lighter, a gentle observation. You notice that the pharmacist's pen has a tiny plastic daisy taped to it, perhaps the earliest known emotional support stationery. As the bottle is handed over, time seems to pause. The woman tucks it into her purse. The pharmacist returns to his stack of papers. The world continues its quiet orbit. And then comes the scholarly uncertainty, floating softly like a feather. Historians still debate whether the culture shaped Valium's popularity, or Valium shaped the culture's expectations of calm. You glide backward, out through the swinging glass doors, into the evening air, cool, rose-colored, hushed. The sky begins to dim. The world slows. As you drift away from the pharmacy doors and into the open, gentle dusk, the last traces of sunlight melt into a warm, amber haze that settles across the quiet streets. The houses around you glow softly, windows shimmering like lanterns floating on a still, dark lake. Each warm rectangle of light carries its own quiet world within, soft laughter, murmured conversations, the clink of dishes being washed, the rustle of someone folding a blanket just so. The air cools with a tender slowness, brushing your cheeks with the delicate touch of evening. Trees sway in a slow-motion dance, their branches whispering faint secrets to one another. A dog barks somewhere far away, and even the sound of it feels softened, rounded at the edges, wrapped in velvet. You walk along the sidewalk with no destination, only a feeling, an easing, an untying, a gentle release. The street lamps flicker to life, their glow diffusing in small halos that shimmer like sleepy stars brought down to earth. The rhythm of your footsteps becomes slower, quieter, until it's no longer a rhythm but a suggestion, a memory of motion falling away. The world grows hushed, as if the entire neighborhood is exhaling in unison. Curtains are drawn, porch lights dim, televisions play at low volume in living rooms warmed by soft blankets and familiar scents. You listen to the night breathe, long and steady. Above you, the sky spreads out in deep blue layers, each one darker, softer, smoother than the last. The first stars appear, gentle pinpricks of light that blink slowly, as if fighting their own drowsiness. And you realize, with a peaceful heaviness, that the story has wrapped itself around you like a warm quilt. All that's left is the soft, quiet drift into wherever dreams decide to take you tonight, slowly, gently, calmly.